Welcome back to the Reading and Writing Podcast. My guest today is Andrew DeYoung, author of the new novel, The Temps. Andrew, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me here. So great to be with you.
Absolutely. Well, if someone listening hasn't yet heard about your new novel, The Temps, how would you describe the novel?
Well, it is a apocalyptic novel, but it's also a office novel, a workplace novel. It is about a group of temp workers at a mega corporation who get trapped in the sort of giant office complex where they work during a global sort of catastrophic event that kills off all the regular employees, but just leaves them stuck in the building. And so they're kind of trying to survive a apocalypse at the place where they worked and were kind of underpaid as temps.
Well, do you remember the original idea or impetus or really bad temp job that led you to write The Temps?
I certainly have had my share of rough and not very good paying office jobs in my life. Worked plenty of low paying or no paying internships and assistantships. And I think that I wanted to write about that time in my life a little bit. But I wanted to make it interesting. I certainly had the experience that I think a lot of people have of maybe graduating from college or even high school and trying to get into the working world and it being really difficult at first. And that being a really hard thing to find work that's meaningful and not too humiliating. And I wanted to write about that, but I wanted sort of a interesting speculative premise that could get me there. And once upon a time, I think it just kind of came to me. I thought, what if it was a group of young office workers who were just stuck in the office during a sort of apocalyptic event? I probably had like Dawn of the Dead, that movie. There's actually two movies. There's the original and the remake. Dawn of the Dead is a zombie apocalypse where the survivors get trapped in a mall. So I just kind of had this idea: what if it was Dawn of the Dead, but instead of a mall, you had an office? And then I started thinking about devising ways to have it just be the most poorly paid workers who were stuck there, while all the executives and the regular employees weren't there, to really focus on that experience of being young and underemployed. And so I kind of devised this scheme where, okay, there's an all company meeting. Maybe there's an all company meeting and everybody gets invited, but the temps don't get invited because they're not regular employees. And it happens during that. And so the temps are stranded, but all the regular employees were outside when it happened at this all company meeting. And I actually know that this is a thing that happens. I know some folks who have worked as temps or contractors at large corporations where there are big yearly meetings to pump up everybody, but all the regular employees leave and all the contract employees have to stay behind. So it actually felt a little bit realistic to me. But then, of course, the speculative premise with the apocalypse allowed me to have a little bit of fun with the premise as well.
That's great. Well, I know that this is a novel, but I'm curious, do you think the Great Resignation, as people are talking about a lot now, is just a blip, or do you think that the pandemic caused people to start re-examining their work-life balance?
I really do think it started something that's real. People, I think, are examining their work-life balance. They're wondering, what good is this job that I have if it's not making me happy? I also think that, we had at least some periods of support from government checks through the pandemic, which I think was a good thing. But that gave kind of people the luxury of sitting back and kind of wondering, what do I really want to be doing with my 9 to 5? And if it's something that just makes you miserable, which I think sadly a lot of people are miserable in their day jobs, Um, I think I'd be better off just quitting. I don't know what happens ultimately if people come back to their jobs or if they seek work that feels more meaningful to them. But I certainly view it as if people are having an opportunity to think critically about their jobs and what they want to be doing with their days, to pay the bills, I think that's just a good thing.
Sure. Well, what was your initial writing journey that led you to writing and getting your first novel published?
Yeah, so I started writing in earnest when I was around 29 years old. This was back in 2012. Um, I had always dreamed of being a writer or a novelist, but I struggled to get any momentum in a writing practice. Something about turning 29, I think that I saw 30 right around the corner, and folks who are my age and older will laugh at that because there's nothing scary about 30. But for whatever reason, when I was 29, I thought, oh no, if I don't do it by the time I'm 30, I'm never going to do it. So I started writing more seriously, did begin really completing novels. I wrote my first novel, which helped me get an agent. That novel that helped me get my agent did not actually find a publishing house, but the next one did. And that was my debut novel, a young adult novel, The Exo Project. And then shortly after that one sold and published, I embarked on writing The Temps, which is not YA. It is my adult fiction debut. Interesting writing journey with The Temps actually is that when I showed it to my agent, I really loved the book. And I showed it to my agent. I said, I'm really excited about this. This is what I want to be doing next. He didn't really like it. And after discussing it, I realized that he wasn't going to be a good advocate for it or for me. And we parted company. And that was a scary thing because, for your listeners who don't know, agents are really important in getting published. But I kind of went out on my own, began submitting to new agents, eventually did get another agent. But the way that this novel came to be is that I actually submitted it without an agent. I submitted it unagented to Keylight Books, which is an imprint of Turner Publishing, and they picked it up off the slush pile. So really kind of an interesting journey through my first book and now in my second published book. That has kind of been bumpy, but ultimately took me to here where the book is coming out, and I'm pretty excited about it.
That's great. Well, are you working on a new novel now?
I have a couple books that are kind of in the can, so to speak, and that are being submitted to various places. And I'm thinking pretty hard about what I want to do next. There's a couple ideas that are kind of knocking at the door. One is a little bit like The Temps, which would be something that kind of engages with weird corporations and the sort of paranoia and dystopian environment that can come about in 21st century capitalism. And then there's some that are a little bit more maybe crime focused. But I need to be working on something. So it's just a matter of picking what's next. So, those few in the can that I'm hoping will find a home. And then the thing, I'm kind of like writing chapters. I'm in the early stages of picking a project to go with next, basically.
That's great. Well, what was your writing process when you were working on The Temps? Do you write an outline before diving into the novel? How does that work for you?
My usual process is to first get an idea. And for me, the idea will come with a sense of the beginning and a sense of where it's going to end up. But I don't have much of the middle. But I know kind of what I want the destination to be. I will not usually write a outline right away. What I will tend to do is write a chapter or two or three, kind of just exploring things and seeing if the world and if the characters are exciting to me. if there's any real potential here. And at a certain point after I've kind of got those first few chapters down and it's feeling good to me and I'm feeling like, yes, this is really something that I want to be working on. At that point, what I tend to do is I will stop and I will write down an outline. And it's not a hyper detailed outline generally that I do. What I will tend to do is I'll write it as a list of things that need to happen. That's how I think of it. This is a list of things that need to happen between now, like where I am in the book, and the end of the book. And it's kind of a punch list. I know that there are these plot points that are necessary to get me from here to there. And then also on that list of things that need to happen are a few scenes often that they're maybe not necessary from a plot standpoint to move the story along and get to the end, but they're fun scenes that I really want to write. So at that point, I've got my outline, my list of things that need to happen. And then I'll kind of dive back in and try as much as I can to get all the way to the end. And I will say that list, that outline, the list of things that needs to happen, it changes several times throughout the remaining drafting that I do for the first draft. Because what will happen is inevitably I'll get into the writing, I'll write to my outline, I'll write the scenes that I want to write. But something about what I discover in the character motivations or something about what I discover in the world will make me realize that my plan, my outline is not quite right. And so I'll continually be going back and editing that a little bit. So it's kind of like, you have a map for where you want to get, but sometimes you find that there's a detour or you want to do a little jaunt over here or whatever. So the map, I know the destination, but the map and the way of getting there changes several times through the drafting. For me, it does.
Sure. Well, what writing advice would you offer for those who are working on their own stories and novels?
Yeah, I think number one is just write what is most exciting to you. You are going to be spending, especially, if you're writing a novel, a long work, you're going to be spending a lot of time with that idea, with that world. You are going to get to a place, most likely, most people do, where you don't like it that much. Sometimes you don't like it very much in the middle. Sometimes you really start to think it's a bad or a silly idea. So the best thing you can do for yourself is just pick a story idea or pick a character or a world that you really have a burning need in yourself to write. Because during those difficult times in the middle, that feeling will help carry you through. That real burning desire to kind of get this story out is something that can carry you through. I would say another one is try to write the book that only you can write, or if not the book, like not an idea that only you could have necessarily, because I think that a lot of people could maybe write the same idea a different way, but write it in a way that only you can write it. Bring your own obsessions and your own point of view to it, because that's another thing that I think will give you some momentum in your own writing and hopefully will give some interest to the world as well, because, you're the most unique and valuable thing that you have as a writer. And then my last piece of advice is one that I give pretty often. And that is to, when you're setting goals for daily or weekly writing, it's going to sound ironic, but I actually think that it is better for people to set modest daily goals or weekly goals than really stretch daily or weekly goals. For a long time as a young writer, I thought that I should be writing 1,000 words a day or something like that. That, that's not a bad goal. And sometimes it's really easy to hit that, but sometimes it's pretty hard. And you don't really need to be in the position of, getting 800 words or whatever the amount is and then beating yourself up about it, because that will start to give you negative associations and sort of guilt associations with the act of writing. I find it's much better to set a goal of whatever is less but achievable for you and just keeps you with some momentum. 250 words a day, 500 words a day, 3 times a week, 4 times a week, whatever it is. Because what will happen, or at least what happened for me, is that when I set a goal that is modest, I find myself meeting that goal, sometimes exceeding that goal, and really finding sort of more of a sense of positivity and accomplishment associated with the act of writing, rather than a feeling of failure and guilt associated with the act of writing. And the fact is, I mean, with that positivity, small progress applied over time can really get you pretty far. It doesn't need to be huge word counts every day, and it doesn't even need to be every day of the week. If you set yourself small goals and hit them, you will get much further than you think when you apply that over time.
Hey, this is Jeff from the Reading and Writing Podcast. Do you know what I love when I'm reading a great new book? A cup of tea. It's such a fun ritual. Settling down with a cup of tea and a new novel that I'm excited to read. Why not treat yourself to a cup of Plum Deluxe teas? Every loose leaf tea is hand blended, fresh, using only the best ingredients. From bold black teas to relaxing herbal blends, incredible dessert teas, or fun floral flavors, there's a delicious tea waiting for you. And I'm not making this up. They have a flavor of tea called Reading Nook Blend Black Tea. It's a tea that pairs perfectly with reading, writing, and relaxing. Plum Deluxe is a family-owned business, and they have one of the best selections of delicious, flavorful herbal teas as well as bold black tea flavors. Visit plumdeluxe.com/listen and use the promo code RWP to save 12% on your first order. Tea also makes a great gift. That's plumdeluxe.com/listen and use the promo code RWP. There's nothing better than enjoying a great cup of tea with a good book. And now you can get your great tea from plumdeluxe.com.
Target has Laundry Day covered because they offer a great selection of concentrated Tide Pods to help with all your laundry needs. Tide Pods clean, freshen, and help rejuvenate your clothes with odor fighters and stain removers. Did you know Tide Pods clean better than the leading liquid bargain detergent? Tide Pods are powerful enough to make your whites white and your brights bright, even in cold water. Just toss in 1 Tide Pod for small loads, 2 for medium, 3 for large. It's that easy. For great value and convenient pickup options, get Tide Pods today at Target.
That's great advice. Something a lot of people don't talk about that often. So good to hear you say that.
Absolutely.
Well, what novels have you read recently that you enjoyed?
Well, I'm currently reading this book. It's called Mouth to Mouth by Antoine. I think his name is Antoine Wilson. It's a relatively new book. And that is, it's a short book, you know, I'm kind of burning through it. I just started reading it like a couple days ago. And that is a book about sort of an encounter, between two people. Someone saves someone from drowning. And then later, begins to almost stalk that person or kind of like become part of their lives, just kind of out of a sense of obsession with this thing that happened, you know, the fact that he saved him from drowning and saved his life. And it really becomes sort of a bit of a thriller and a story of obsession in a way. I'm finding that really interesting just due to the simplicity of the simplicity, but also the interest that I find in the premise. Another book that I read recently that I think is really fantastic is a book called Devil House by John Darnell. And if you know that name, it's because he's a musician He's basically the man behind the band, the Mountain Goats.
Mm-hmm.
But he's also a novelist. He wrote a couple novels before Devil House, and it's kind of a horror premise, where someone is occupying a house that might be haunted. It has something to do with the satanic panic of the 1980s and 1990s. But what John Darnell does with premises like these, if anybody has read any of his prior books, is really fascinating and bizarre. And I mean, I hesitate to say too much about it because I think it's best experienced, really. It's just really been a fantastic book. Certainly there are plenty more, but those are two that I either enjoyed or am enjoying currently.
Sure. Well, where can people find you online if they'd like to learn more about you and your novels?
So I have a website, andrewdeyoung.com. I am on Twitter at Andrew J. DeYoung. I've got the J in there because someone else has Andrew DeYoung. I imagine a lot of authors and have this problem, but nonetheless, that's where you can find me. I do have a email newsletter, Substack actually, which you can just find at andrewdeyoung.substack.com. Generally, there, what I write about is movies and TV shows. But I'll probably have some pieces up that have a little bit to do with the book over the next few weeks here, and maybe by the time your listeners get around to it, there'll be plenty of writing about the novel. So I mean, certainly always looking for more subscribers to that, because it's a really enjoyable thing that I get to write about stuff that I'm interested in and just have an audience for it. I think those are the main ones: website, newsletter, and Twitter.
That's great. Well, again, we've been speaking with Andrew DeYoung, author of the new novel, The Temps. The book is available now, so go buy a copy. And Andrew, thanks for doing this interview.
Thanks so much, Jeff. Appreciate it.
Great.
Jacob pushed the cart through workspaces and conference rooms and cafeterias, supremely alone. The office space was a patchwork of walls and hallways and doors, open floor plan desk pools, cubicle farms, private offices, kitchenettes, collaborative spaces with funky couches and whiteboard walls. Mostly these rooms were empty, but sometimes Jacob sensed human presences nearby, the tap of computer keys at the click of a mouse from behind a chest-height partition wall, a cleared throat from inside a private workroom, the shape of a rounded back, head and shoulders hunched, turned inward toward a screen. Red badge workers like him, left behind under the buzzing lights of the fluorescents while the regular employees went to their special meeting in the sun. In one room, Jacob met eyes with a girl walking to her desk with a mug of freshly steaming coffee clutched in one hand. Golden hair tumbled curling onto her shoulders, and oversized nerd sheet glasses arched from her eyebrows to below her cheekbones. She smiled awkwardly, then angled her eyes downward and kept walking. Jacob looked at the address code on the next piece of mail, then consulted his map. The delivery was almost at the other end of the wing, near the amphitheater. Not wanting to walk such a long distance through that maze of rooms and winding cubicle lanes, he moved toward an exit door and pushed through, back to the open concourse. Above him, the ceiling vaulted almost comically high, hundreds of feet over his head. He was reminded once again of cathedrals, of the European churches he'd once visited during a semester abroad. Jacob remembered little from these tours, couldn't remember any of the facts the tour guides had offered about the building's design and construction, except one. The height of a cathedral ceiling was intended to draw the eyes up, to usher supplicants from lives of bleak medieval deprivation into hallowed sanctuaries of awe. Perhaps this was the purpose of the Delphi building's design, too, to awe the corporate Jones walking beneath those high ceilings, to intimidate them into states of docility and obedience. Jacob walked almost to the top of the wing, then found a door back into the offices. At that moment, a low thud drew Jacob's eyes up, past the cubicle walls to the tall windows looking onto the courtyard. The sound of thumping bass was coming from the direction of the amphitheater. They were playing music at the all-company meeting. Jacob grinned, then laughed aloud as he pictured the mailroom lady. Her name was probably something like Irene or Carol, he'd decided, waiting for the Delphi CEO amidst millennials and Gen Zers as pump-up music blared from speakers. He recalled videos he'd seen on Facebook and Twitter, viral at first, then ubiquitous as memes, of product rollouts at tech companies. Executives shouting into headset mics as employees screamed like tween girls at a boy band concert. Steve Jobs accepting adulation from throngs of tech journalists. Bill Gates clapping his hands and dancing awkwardly on a stage. Jacob walked toward the windows, then left the mail cart behind as he went right up to the glass. Abandoning work so soon, slacking his first day on the job, but he wanted to see. The amphitheater was sunk into the ground as Jacob had suspected. His view out the window was near the back of the amphitheater, with rows of benches leading down, concentric semicircles following the line of the building as it angled to a point at the top of the triangle. The slope of the ground sunk down below the level of the floor Jacob stood on, revealing a sublevel below his feet. From front to back, the theater was at least 500 feet long, seating thousands of employees shoulder to shoulder. The back bench of the amphitheater began about 20 feet away from him, separated by a thin strip of grass. Jacob put his hand near the glass and waved, testing to see if he was visible through the windows. But nobody, not even the employees sitting closest to him, made any sign of seeing him. They kept their eyes forward, craning over the heads of the people in front of them to wait for Tristan Brandt to take the stage. The windows were all one-way glass, tinted but transparent from the inside looking out, opaque and mirrored from the outside looking in. Jacob was invisible, anonymous. Then below there was a commotion, the thousands of employees standing and applauding, faces flush with sun and adulation. Jacob looked down, eyes darting to find what was creating all the excitement. Then he spotted him, a man walking to the stage, waving. Employees in the benches nearest Brandt clustered and reached toward him. He reached and grasped at their hands, accepted their touch on his back and shoulders as he made his way to the lectern. Brandt wore blue jeans and an unbuttoned gray sport coat over a white collared shirt. Jacob couldn't quite see his face. His view was obstructed by the hordes of Delphi employees mobbing him, hoping for some contact with the CEO. But in glimpses, he got the impression of a fit man in his 50s, with thinning salt and pepper hair. Throughout the amphitheater, employees stood, clapping and whistling in a standing ovation that went on for minutes even after Brandt had leapt on the stage and taken the lectern, and that might have gone on for several more. Might have, that is, if the poisonous yellow mist hadn't descended.